Hey guys, today we step into the crisp air of a medieval town, blanketed in snow. And you are the gatekeeper, standing sentinel as frost nibbles at your cheeks, and icicles hang like tiny frozen chandeliers from the castle walls. You probably won't survive this if you imagine staying awake for the entire winter night without at least a cozy fire or a steaming mug of something sweet. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Oh, and don't forget to post your location and local time. I'm curious where in the world you're listening while I guide you through this quiet, snowy vigil. You trudge across the icy courtyard boots, crunching in rhythm with your thoughts, each step sending little clouds of frosty air into the pale morning. The castle walls, gray and steadfast, rise around you like the bones of some ancient giant, and you feel the soft weight of responsibility settle on your shoulders. Historians still argue whether medieval towns actually needed gatekeepers to fend off real threats, or if most of the routine was ceremonial. But either way, you are here, and the town sleeps beneath the blanket of winter. Your breath mingles with the cool air, creating tiny spirals of warmth that vanish almost immediately. You notice the frost glittering on the cobblestones, each crystal catching the dim dawn light like a miniature constellation underfoot. A thin layer of snow muffles the usual morning noises, the clatter of merchants, the distant barking of dogs, leaving only the whisper of wind against stone. It's peaceful in a way that almost feels magical, the kind of calm that makes you forget how many hours you have to endure the cold watch. You glance upward at the main gate, where iron hinges glint, and frost forms delicate patterns along the wooden beams. You probably won't admit it aloud, but you like these quiet moments alone, even if the wind steals your warmth, and the distant chiming of the bell feels like a polite reminder that time is still passing. You remember reading that some medieval gatekeepers would carve little marks into the beams to count days or track visitors. Some claimed they were just doodles. Others swore they carried secret messages. As the sun slowly rises, spilling muted light across the walls, you feel a shift in the air. Smoke curls from chimneys in the village beyond, and you can almost smell the faint aroma of bread and wood fire drifting toward you. Medieval towns often relied on open hearths not just for cooking, but as a form of passive heating, and there's a quirky theory that some bakers would intentionally leave small fires in their ovens overnight to signal the guards that all was well. You shrug at the thought, smiling at the idea that even back then, people found creative ways to communicate without emails or phones. You take a deep breath and let your eyes wander over the snow-covered rooftops, tracing patterns left by night wind or early birds searching for breakfast scraps. Some historians still argue whether these rooftops were ever meant to be purely functional, or if their slanted designs had hidden messages or rituals encoded into them like a secret language of timber and tile. Meanwhile, you notice a single pigeon hopping across a frozen fountain, lifting tiny puffs of snow with each step, and it makes you grin. Even in a world without notifications or group chats, life finds ways to sneak in small, charming moments. As you settle into your stance near the main gate, you feel the weight of leather gloves and the crisp edge of your scarf against your nose. There's a soft crunch underfoot, and you take note of the frosty tracks that crisscross the courtyard, wondering which were left by humans and which might belong to wandering cats or dogs. In the distance, a horse shuffles, leaving deep hoofprints that will soon be covered by drifting snow. You think about the scholars who debate whether animals were deliberately trained to patrol alongside humans in medieval towns, or if they were merely accidental companions on long winter mornings. Either way, their presence is comforting. The wind shifts, carrying with it the faint murmur of the village awakening. You listen, closely aware of every tiny sound, The squeak of a gate hinge, the rustle of snow-laden branches, the far-off call of a merchant's apprentice. It's all part of your duty, but it also becomes a meditation, a gentle rhythm that helps you focus, breathe, and even enjoy the cold in a strange, quiet way. You probably won't admit to anyone, but there's a cozy satisfaction in being the one who stands watch while the rest of the world stirs gently to life. By the time the sun fully lifts above the horizon, the frost begins to glint like a field of diamonds across the walls. You shift your stance, feeling the slow warmth of the morning creep into your muscles, despite the lingering chill. Medieval gatekeepers often had long hours with little distraction, yet some managed to pass the time by carving small figurines or sketching landscapes, leaving traces of personal creativity behind. You glance at the wood around the gate, imagining tiny marks or scratches left by those who came before you, connecting you to centuries of quiet guardianship. And so, with snow sparkling and the day awakening gently around you, you settle into the rhythm of your watch. You know the long hours ahead will be filled with frost silence and subtle wonder, and somehow that makes the winter morning feel not quite lonely, but intimate, like you are part of a secret conversation between the town and the cold, sparkling world outside its gates. You adjust your scarf, smile at a curling wisp of smoke in the distance, and prepare to glide into the next moments with the patience and calm of a true gatekeeper. The frozen moat stretches out before you, like a sheet of glass catching the pale winter sunlight and scattering it in tiny glittering fragments. You trudge closer, boots crunching on the thin crust of ice, and notice the subtle ripple patterns beneath the surface where the water refuses to freeze completely. Medieval engineers often debated how to best construct moats to both deter attackers and manage water flow, and historians still argue whether the typical design was more practical or simply intended to impress visiting dignitaries. You shrug at the thought, feeling a little smug that your boots leave perfect temporary impressions on the snow, unlike the deep tracks of horses or carts that would soon disappear under drifting powder. A pair of ducks paddle lazily near an open patch of water, their orange feet flicking against the icy surface. You watch them, entertained by how undisturbed they seem despite the freezing temperatures. In some local lore, ducks in winter moats were believed to bring good luck to gatekeepers, a charming superstition that might explain why certain guards left small bits of bread for them. You chuckle quietly. If you mention this to anyone else, they'd probably roll their eyes, but here on your silent beat, the idea of magical snow-loving ducks seems entirely plausible. You move along the edge of the moat, pausing to study the wooden drawbridge that spans it. Frost collects in delicate lines along its hinges, and you wonder about the countless hands that maintained it over the decades. Scholars still debate whether medieval towns prioritized aesthetic symmetry in drawbridge construction or simply relied on repeated trial and error. Either way, the result is functional and quietly beautiful. You trace a finger along a carved notch on the rail, a mark left perhaps by a guard long ago counting days of duty, or maybe just a bored craftsman seeking entertainment during a long winter. The wind picks up, whispering across the icy water, and you huddle slightly deeper into your coat. Snowflakes begin to drift down, each one unique landing on your gloves, your scarf, and your eyelashes. You remember reading that medieval townspeople sometimes believed the shapes of snowflakes predicted the coming harvest or hinted at hidden fortunes. Historians still argue whether these beliefs influenced practical decisions or were just fanciful distractions. You smile at the thought of villagers earnestly reading flakes, perhaps adjusting their bread-baking schedule according to a particularly lacy formation. A low crow caws from across the moat, breaking the near silence. You watch as it hops along the edge, pecking at snow-covered stones, a dark contrast to the sparkling world around it. In some fringe accounts, crows were said to act as watchbirds for gatekeepers, signaling danger before humans even noticed it. You snort softly at the image, although it's far more likely the birds were just hungry and persistent rather than loyal medieval companions. Still, the thought of a feathered sentry adds a certain charm to your otherwise solitary morning. You notice a faint trail along the bank, where children have skated on thinner ice. Yesterday their laughter long vanished, but still echoing in your memory. Snow and ice often preserve small traces of human life in ways that feel almost magical. You pause to admire the frozen patterns, imagining how the first ice skaters centuries ago might have stumbled, fallen, and laughed in the same playful way. Historians still argue whether medieval towns actively encouraged winter play or if such activities were tolerated reluctantly by strict civic authorities. Either way, your imagination fills in the gaps, making the frozen moat a lively place despite its silence. Continuing along the edge, you notice that the ice reflects not just light, but also the sky's subtle hues, pale blues, soft grays, and the occasional blush of early sunlight. You breathe deeply, the cold air filling your lungs and sharpening your awareness. Some gatekeepers reportedly practiced a kind of meditative walking along the moat, finding rhythm and calm in the repetitive pace. You follow the example, stepping slowly, letting the sound of crunching snow mark time and soothe the edges of your mind. It's easy to imagine that each careful step connects you, however briefly, to centuries of watchful eyes and frozen mornings. The moat curves gently, and you stop at a small wooden post that once held a lantern. Frost clings to it like tiny crystals, and you tap the wood, appreciating its texture. Some scholars debate whether such posts were primarily decorative or functional, but you like to think they served both purposes, guiding travelers while adding a subtle, comforting rhythm to the visual landscape. The wind shifts again, bringing with it the faint scent of smoke from distant chimneys, reminding you that life carries on even in the quietest corners of the town. Finally, as you pause at the end of your patrol, you watch the ducks dive and resurface, the ice shimmering beneath them. A sense of calm settles over you, a quiet satisfaction in observing these simple, frozen rhythms of life. The moat is more than a defensive feature. It's a living tableau of winter, full of small wonders, secret signs and subtle stories, patiently waiting for anyone willing to notice. You tuck your hands into your coat, smile at the tiny world in motion before you, and prepare to move along the walls, knowing the next moment of quiet wonder is just steps away. You move from the moat toward the wall's, lantern in hand, the glow casting gentle golden circles across frost-dusted stone. The wind is a soft companion whispering through crenellations, carrying the scent of smoke and distant wood fires. Lighting these lanterns has always been a delicate ritual. Tilt the wick just so shield the flame from sudden gusts, and step back to admire the pattern of light along the ramparts. Medieval gatekeepers often followed strict routines like this, though some fringe accounts claim certain guards believed the lanterns themselves had protective spirits that warded off ill fortune. You raise an eyebrow at that thought. Maybe they did. Maybe it was just a comforting trick against the cold. As you walk along the wall, your footsteps echo softly, blending with the faint creak of frozen timber and the distant murmur of the village awakening below. The walls themselves seem alive, their rough surfaces whispering stories to anyone patient enough to notice. Historians still argue whether the design of battlements was purely for defense, or whether some aspects were deliberately decorative, intended to awe visitors or project power. You can't help but feel a little humbled as you trace your hand along the stone, imagining centuries of hands that have done the same. You pause near an alcove where snow has drifted in small, delicate mounds. Tiny icicles dangle from the ledge above, catching the lantern light and scattering it like 1,000 miniature prisms. You remember reading that some medieval guards would hang charms here, carved from wood or metal, to protect themselves from illness or bad luck. You smile quietly. While historians debate the effectiveness of such talismans, their presence adds a peculiar charm to the otherwise austere walls. Looking down at the village streets, you notice merchants arranging frost-covered goods. Wooden barrels glint with ice crystals, and tiny streams of smoke rise from chimneys, signaling breakfast preparations. In some quirky accounts, merchants would leave small trinkets or charms with their goods, believing they encouraged good sales or appeased neighborhood spirits. You chuckle softly, imagining a shopper buying cabbages alongside a tiny wooden soldier meant to bring luck, hardly the usual market experience today, but somehow comforting in its own way. The wind gusts again, rattling the lantern, and you adjust it carefully. Snowflakes cling to your hair and eyelashes, and you notice that the walls themselves seem to hum faintly with the cold. Medieval builders sometimes embedded small metal rods in the masonry, claiming it helped prevent cracking, but fringe theories suggest the vibrations also carried subtle warnings of approaching danger, an early kind of acoustic alarm system. You shake your head, amused at the idea of a medieval stone wall acting like a giant chilly lie detector. As you continue pacing, you glance toward a small corner where shadows pool. The play of light and dark makes the walls seem almost alive, and you swear you can imagine faces watching silently from centuries past. Some scholars argue that these sensations were purely psychological, a byproduct of isolation and monotony, while others suggest guards actively encouraged imagination to keep alertness sharp. You smile at the thought, realizing the walls themselves could be your most loyal companions during a long winter watch. Your footsteps bring you to a stretch of the ramparts that curves gently outward, offering a view of the snowy countryside beyond the village. The fields sparkle in pale sunlight, dotted with the occasional wandering animal or lone chimney plume. Historians still debate whether townsfolk of the time relied more on observation from the walls or on mounted patrols for early warning of trouble. From your vantage point, it feels almost meditative to simply watch the world move slowly beneath you, each frozen moment suspended in quiet beauty. Stopping for a moment, you notice the intricate frost patterns on the stone parapet. Tiny crystalline formations spread like lace, catching your attention in a way that makes the hours seem to melt away. Fringe sources suggest that some guards would trace these patterns with a finger to calm their nerves, or pass idle time believing it connected them subtly to the natural world. You try it yourself, leaving a faint trace in the frost before it melts under the weak sun, smiling at the thought that you share this simple ritual across centuries. The bell in the tower rings in the distance, slow and deliberate. Its deep tone resonates along the walls and across the frozen moat, a sound both grounding and hauntingly beautiful. Medieval bell towers were essential for marking time, summoning villagers, and signaling emergencies, though historians still argue whether winter bells were used differently, perhaps more for morale than practicality. You listen carefully, noting each echo, each vibration through stone, and feel an almost hypnotic rhythm that pulls your mind toward quiet reflection. By the time you finish lighting the last lantern along this section of the wall, the village appears bathed in gentle gold and soft shadows. The combination of snow smoke and lantern light creates a scene that feels both surreal and comforting. You lean lightly against the wall, letting your breath mist in the cold air, and take a moment to appreciate the quiet magic of your surroundings. Even if the world below is bustling with minor chaos up here, the walls and the flickering lights hold you in a serene, suspended bubble of winter calm. Peering down from the ramparts, you catch sight of the market square below, blanketed in snow like a powdered sugar cake. Merchants shuffle about, setting up stalls with gingerbread smoked fish and vegetables frost-kissed from the morning cold. You notice one man arranging tiny ceramic figurines, birds, cats, and fantastical beasts. Historians still argue whether these whimsical items were simply for sale or held symbolic purposes, perhaps to amuse children or invite good luck. You can't help but smile imagining a local child picking up a tiny dragon figurine, convinced it might come to life overnight. The smell of wood smoke mingles with the faint tang of preserved meats, carrying up the ramparts to greet you like a familiar old friend. Some fringe accounts suggest medieval vendors would sometimes add herbs or spices not for cooking, but to mask odors, attract attention, or even ward off minor spirits. You lift a gloved hand to the wind, inhaling deeply, savoring the comforting earthy blend. It's hard to believe anyone could resist a small smile walking through this gentle chaos. Children dart across the square, their boots crunching in the snow, laughing as they chase one another around barrels and crates. Their antics leave fleeting tracks that will soon vanish under drifting powder. You remember reading that winter games were common in towns like this, and yet historians still debate whether adults secretly encouraged the activity as a method of social cohesion or merely tolerated it to avoid constant complaints. Either way, watching them brings warmth to your chest, a reminder that life persists even in the coldest months. You pause to observe a baker carrying a tray of spiced bread steam curling upward in delicate wisps. Some bakers supposedly left hidden charms inside their loaves, tiny symbols pressed into dough meant to protect the household that purchased them. You chuckle quietly, thinking about modern equivalents, perhaps a note tucked into a cookie or a candy with a fortune. It's a small, reassuring continuity. Across time, people love to add tiny surprises, even in the harshest winter. A cat slinks along the edge of a stall, its fur fluffed against the cold. You notice how villagers treat animals with quiet respect, letting them scavenge small bits of food without fear. Fringe accounts suggest cats were sometimes considered miniature guardians of property, especially during long frozen nights. You smile at the thought, imagining the cat as a subtle, silent assistant to your own watch, though it probably only wants breakfast. The market's rhythm is soothing. Merchants call softly to potential customers. The occasional cart squeaks over frozen cobblestones, and the soft crunch of boots punctuates the muted winter air. You reflect on the historical fact that winter markets were essential in medieval towns, providing not just sustenance, but also social connection when travel was difficult. Some historians still argue whether these markets were more about economy or community, but standing here, you feel the answer in the gentle ebb and flow of daily life. Your gaze drifts to a stall selling brightly colored yarns and textiles. You imagine the women who spun and dyed these threads, sometimes incorporating unusual techniques or colors that were unique to their village. Fringe anecdotes suggest that certain hues were believed to influence mood, ward off bad luck, or even signal secret messages. You smile at the creativity hidden within something as simple as a skein of wool, marveling at the blend of function and artistry. As you continue observing, a soft breeze carries the faint strains of a lute from a nearby window. Someone is playing, perhaps to keep spirits warm during the cold morning. Music was a subtle yet vital part of medieval winter life. Historians note, though they still argue whether performers were professionals, villagers, or wandering minstrels. Whatever the answer, it's comforting, a gentle undercurrent to the visual tapestry of market stalls, snow-dusted roofs, and busy townsfolk. A young apprentice trips over a frozen patch, spilling a basket of apples. You watch as an older merchant helps him gather the fruit, speaking in soft tones. Historians still debate the social structures of apprenticeships. In winter months, did masters show leniency or insist on strict discipline? Watching this small act of patience and guidance, you feel reassured. Some things, like kindness, have remained unchanged over centuries. Finally, the sun climbs higher, casting longer shadows across the square. Steam curls from ovens, smoke drifts from chimneys, and you take a deep breath, savoring the market's gentle hum. The town seems alive, yet quiet, a mixture of human endeavor and winter's serene pause. You tuck your hands into your gloves, appreciating the comforting cadence of commerce and snow, knowing that below the walls you watch over life carries on in all its small, magical, everyday ways. Your gaze drifts upward from the bustling market to the rooftops, each one dusted with snow, like powdered sugar on a gingerbread village. Thin plumes of smoke rise from chimneys, curling into the pale winter sky, and you trace them with your eyes, as if following invisible threads connecting each home. Historians note that medieval heating methods were surprisingly varied. Some households used central hearths, while others relied on smaller braziers or even heated stones. Fringe accounts suggest that certain families secretly placed herbs in their smoke to purify the air or invite pleasant dreams, probably more superstition than science, but charming nonetheless. You notice how the snow clings to roof tiles in patterns forming ridges and shadows that shift with the sun's angle. Some scholars still argue whether roof shapes were optimized purely for water drainage, or if subtle curves and angles held symbolic meaning, perhaps intended to reflect social status or attract good fortune. You reach out to touch a frosted ridge with a gloved hand, marveling at the delicate texture, and for a moment you feel connected to countless unseen fingers that once traced the same patterns. Chimney smoke drifts lazily over the battlements, carrying with it a medley of scents: roasted chestnuts, spiced bread, and the faint tang of burning wood. You inhale deeply, letting the aroma settle into your senses, imagining yourself wandering from house to house, sampling the village's culinary charms. In some unusual accounts, bakers would sometimes embed small charms or tiny figurines in dough, both as a playful surprise and a token of luck for the family who bought it. You smile at the thought that centuries ago, a tiny object hidden in bread could spark the same delight a child experiences opening a present today. A cat prowls along a ridge, its fur puffed against the cold, watching the drifting snow with keen eyes. Fringe tales describe village cats as guardians against unseen spirits, their movements and vigilance considered a subtle layer of protection for homes. You quietly imagine the cat as a co-guardian of the walls, a silent companion during your morning watch. Even if it's simply searching for a mouse, the idea of a vigilant furry sentinel adds warmth to your solitary post. You shift your gaze to the highest tower, where a lone weather vane turns slowly in the winter breeze. Its motion reminds you of the medieval emphasis on observation. Tracking wind and weather was vital for both daily life and strategic planning. Historians still debate how systematically townsfolk actually recorded such patterns versus relying on experience and intuition. As you watch the vane, you feel a kinship with the generations of gatekeepers who monitored the sky, the snow, and the subtle signs that winter offered, translating nature's quiet signals into human understanding. Frost sparkles along window ledges, catching the sunlight in soft, prismatic flashes. You note how medieval artisans sometimes carved subtle motifs into these ledges, patterns thought to invite prosperity or protect against misfortune. Some scholars argue whether these designs were functional aesthetic or purely symbolic, but as you observe, you appreciate the blend of practicality and artistry. Even a small carved star or cross seems to whisper stories of hope and patience, quiet companions in the long winter months. A pair of birds flits between chimneys, their movements precise and delicate. Historians note that wild animals were often unwitting participants in the rhythms of town life, providing early warnings or simple companionship. Fringe tales suggest that certain birds were thought to carry messages between households or deliver subtle omens. You watch them hop and flutter, imagining them as tiny couriers of fortune, delivering silent advice across the snowy rooftops. You take a slow step along the battlements, tracing the faint footprints left by earlier patrols, both human and animal. The snow beneath your boots crunches rhythmically, creating a meditative cadence that matches the sway of smoke and the flicker of sunlight. Some medieval gatekeepers reportedly kept small journals of daily patterns, noting snowdrifts, smoke direction, and the habits of local wildlife. Historians still argue whether these records were primarily practical, mystical, or just a means of passing the long, cold hours. Either way, you feel a quiet satisfaction in tracing these patterns today. Finally, as the morning stretches toward noon, you pause at a chimney's base, watching tiny rivulets of melted snow trickle down along the tiles. The roofs above you form a delicate winter skyline, a mosaic of human ingenuity, daily survival, and subtle beauty. You take a deep breath, letting the cold air fill your lungs, and smile at the quiet rhythm of snow smoke and stone. It is a scene that seems to belong equally to centuries past, and to this moment, a gentle reminder that even in harsh winter life, creativity and small comforts persist. A soft toll drifts from the bell tower above each note, resonating slowly across the frosted town. You tilt your head, listening to how the deep sound vibrates through stone and air settling in the marrow of your bones. Bells were critical in medieval towns, marking time-signaling events and sometimes even guiding travelers through snow-covered streets. Historians still argue whether winter bells were used more for morale or for practical coordination, but standing here, it's clear they serve both, creating a comforting heartbeat across the sleeping town. The tower itself is a study in quiet endurance. Weathered stone absorbs light differently across its surfaces, shadows shifting with each subtle movement of the sun. Fringe accounts claim that some bell towers were intentionally built to exaggerate sound propagation, carrying messages farther than anyone strictly needed. You chuckle softly, imagining medieval residents, listening carefully, waiting for each note to hint at some hidden secret or routine arrival. Perhaps the bells themselves were a form of gentle storytelling, narrating the passage of hours through tone and resonance. You adjust your scarf and peer over the battlements, noticing how frost patterns cling to the tower's edges. Tiny stalactites of ice dangle delicately from ledges sparkling in the morning sun. In certain corners of the town, superstitious guards believed that these ice formations could predict the harshness of the winter ahead. Historians still debate whether these beliefs influenced practical preparations or were simple folklore passed down to occupy long hours in the cold. Either way, watching the fragile ice makes you pause, marveling at the subtle artistry of nature. A crow lands on a nearby parapet, shaking snow from its feathers. Fringe stories suggest crows were early warning systems, alerting gatekeepers to approaching visitors or hidden threats. You smirk at the thought. The bird likely only wants food, but its sharp gaze and careful steps give it an air of officious importance. You shift slightly, observing how its presence casts tiny shadows across the stone, moving in rhythm with your own watchful stance. The bell tolls again, slower this time, each note lingering longer in the cold air. You notice that winter air carries sound differently, softer yet clearer, more penetrating. Some scholars argue that this phenomenon allowed towns to economize the number of bell rings needed to summon attention, a practical adaptation to season rather than design. You lean against the tower wall, letting the echoes sink into your senses, imagining centuries of guards, listening in similar stillness, counting each toll like a heartbeat of shared vigilance. A thin plume of smoke rises from a distant bakery drifting toward the tower. The aroma of fresh bread and burning wood blends with the faint scent of melting frost. Medieval bakers often coordinated oven use with bell signals, timing bakes to coincide with communal activities. Fringe accounts suggest some bakers even tapped rhythms on their ovens in sync with bells as a private ritual. You can't help but smile at the thought of bread and music intersecting centuries before Spotify playlists existed. You trace your gaze along the tower's stairwell, imagining the countless pairs of feet that have ascended and descended over the years. Some guards would pause on the landings, taking note of the shifting light and distant snowdrifts, almost meditative in the act. Historians still argue whether these pauses were mandated, encouraged, or simply habit. Either way, the quiet rhythm of footsteps echoing bell tones and distant village sounds forms a delicate orchestra of winter life, grounding you in your vigil. A faint shadow crosses the town square, perhaps a merchant checking supplies or a villager delivering news. Even in the stillness, life continues in subtle movements. You remember that some medieval towns used shadows and sound patterns to relay information discreetly, a kind of visual semaphore without the need for words. Fringe scholars debate whether this was widespread or isolated practice, but observing the square from above, you can see how easily messages could travel unnoticed, almost magically in the quiet winter morning. The sun drifts higher, softening the icy glare across rooftops and walls. Your lantern flickers gently in response to a shifting breeze, casting dancing shadows along the parapet. You adjust its angle content to watch how light and frost interact. Bells, smoke, ice, and quiet movement all form a tapestry of observation, rhythm, and subtle wonder. Standing here, you feel the pulse of the town, the invisible threads of history and daily life, all converging in your solitary but profoundly connected morning watch. You set out along the snowy battlements, each step deliberate as the cold crunches beneath your boots. The walls stretch ahead, winding and curving like a frozen river of stone. Snowflakes drift lazily, clinging to your cloak, and eyelashes softening edges and turning familiar architecture into a gentle, dreamlike landscape. Medieval guards often found that winter patrols, though tedious, offered a meditative rhythm. Historians still argue whether these walks were designed primarily for security, or whether the repetitive motion also served a mental health purpose, keeping minds alert yet calm during long, solitary hours. As you pace, you notice small indentations in the stone where other guards have rested or traced patterns with their fingers. Fringe accounts suggest these could be minor charms, protective marks, or even secret symbols only visible to other gatekeepers. You press your palm lightly against the cold surface, feeling the rough texture and imagining centuries of hands doing exactly the same. A tiny shiver runs down your spine, not from fear, but from a quiet sense of connection across time. The snow crunches underfoot, but the wind carries soft whispers from the village below. A merchant's laughter drifts up, mingling with the bark of a dog and the occasional clatter of wooden wheels on cobblestones. You note how sound behaves differently in winter. The air is denser, clearer, and carries subtle shifts that would have been crucial for medieval watchfulness. Some scholars argue that patrols were positioned to optimize this acoustic advantage, allowing guards to detect distant noises with minimal movement. You imagine listening intently to footsteps, hushed voices, and perhaps even the flutter of a bird's wing. A crow hops along the parapet, its black feathers stark against the white snow. Fringe tales describe these birds as unofficial assistants to gatekeepers, alerting them to unusual activity, or simply serving as silent companions. You smirk, imagining the crow as a fellow sentinel silently judging your pacing while waiting for someone, or something, to appear on the snow-covered streets below. It hops once more, flapping its wings, sending a light spray of snow into the air like tiny sparkling stars. You pause at a crenellation and peer through the narrow opening, scanning the village below. Footprints mark the snow, some recent, some faint and drifting, telling stories of villagers who moved through the night or early morning. Historians still debate whether medieval townsfolk relied on visual observation like this for security, or if it was more about curiosity and maintaining social order. Either way, each track sparks a narrative in your mind, a quiet tale of human movement in a frozen world. Continuing along the walls, you notice the faint shimmer of frost forming delicate lace along the edge of the battlements. You trace it with your finger, careful not to break the fragile crystals. Fringe sources suggest that guards sometimes interpreted these frost patterns as omens, subtle signals of weather luck, or even the town's collective mood. You chuckle softly, wondering if anyone actually believed it, or if it was just a charming way to pass time while keeping vigilant. The distant bell rings again, slow and steady, a comforting pulse that marks the progression of hours. You let your eyes follow the sound toward the horizon, where rooftops, frozen streets, and drifting smoke create a quiet, almost magical panorama. Some medieval theorists debated whether bell tones carried specific symbolic meanings depending on time of day or season. Historians still argue if winter bells differed in intent from summer tolls, but listening here, it's hard not to feel that each resonant note is part of a gentle narrative unfolding across the town. Your breath rises in soft clouds, mixing with the scent of smoke and pine from distant hearths. You pause for a moment, feeling the stillness, the cadence of your boots, and the muted sounds below. The walls themselves seem alive, echoing the rhythm of centuries of watchful feet, tiny rituals, and quiet observation. You step carefully, letting the snow cushion each movement, absorbing the gentle hush of the winter morning, and folding it into your own internal rhythm. By the time you reach a small turret at the far end of the wall, the town stretches out beneath you like a delicate miniature scene. The frozen moat, snow-dusted rooftops, and winding streets all tell stories without words. You take a slow, deep breath, adjusting your scarf and gloves, feeling a peculiar calm wash over you. The walls may be cold, and the wind sharp, but in this quiet, measured pacing, you sense both connection and serenity. The enduring pulse of a snowy medieval world, observed patiently, attentively, and with gentle care. You pause at the turret, letting the wind tousle your hair and lift the hem of your cloak. From this vantage, the village sprawls beneath you like a patchwork quilt of rooftops and snow-dusted streets. Tiny columns of smoke rise from chimneys, curling and twisting like lazy dancers. Medieval towns often use these visual cues to monitor daily activity, and even the health of residents' fire indicated life warmth and ongoing routines. Historians still argue whether such observations were intentional surveillance or simply natural awareness, but from here, it's both practical and mesmerizing. You lean lightly against the stone, tracing the frost patterns with gloved fingers. Each intricate crystal seems to tell a story, perhaps the wind's direction, the moisture in the air, or even a fleeting moment captured in ice. Fringe accounts suggest that guards sometimes interpreted these frost patterns as secret messages or omens, especially during long winter watches. You chuckle quietly at the thought, imagining yourself deciphering icy runes left by mischievous spirits, or just the unpredictable artistry of nature itself. A faint sound reaches you, the soft crunch of boots along the market square below. Merchants and villagers move with quiet purpose, voices hushed against the cold. Medieval towns relied on this subtle orchestra of sound historians, note for communication and community cohesion. Fringe tales embellish these ordinary noises, claiming that attentive gatekeepers could read the day's fortunes from the rhythm of footsteps and shifting carts. You smile at the idea, feeling a curious connection to those long-past observers attuned to life's delicate pulses. The turret's wooden railing is iced over, and you brush away a thin layer of frost before resting a hand there. You notice how the ice reflects sunlight, scattering soft beams across the stone floor. Some scholars argue that even functional architecture in medieval towns incorporated subtle aesthetic considerations, such as angles and materials that caught light or created visual rhythm. You marvel at the thought, realizing that beauty often accompanies necessity, even in the coldest, most utilitarian places. A blackbird lands on the parapet nearby, shaking its feathers to rid them of frost. Fringe accounts sometimes depict these birds as informal messengers between humans and nature, or as little guardians of the town's unseen corners. You watch its careful movements, imagining the bird as a silent companion to your vigil. It hops along, pecking gently, adding a soft, organic rhythm to the stone-bound cadence of your patrol. Looking outward, you spot the forest that skirts the village, snow settling in gentle layers across branches and undergrowth. Historians note that forests provided not only resources, but also subtle threats which required careful monitoring. Scholars still debate how much time guards actually spent observing distant woods versus performing domestic tasks, but here, with frost crunching beneath your boots and eyes tracing every shadow, you feel intimately connected to both worlds, the human settlement and the quiet wilderness beyond. You catch a flicker of movement in the snow below a lone fox, cautious and nimble, darting between rooftops and open spaces. Medieval observers often noted animal behavior as subtle indicators of weather or the presence of humans. Fringe stories suggest some townspeople believed foxes carried messages or omens, though historians argue this was mostly superstition. You grin, enjoying the blend of practical observation and fanciful imagination that winter encourages. The turret's bell, smaller than the main tower's, rings with a soft, clear tone. Its sound drifts across the village, mingling with smoke footsteps and the occasional call of a merchant. Bells were sometimes used to regulate time mark shifts or coordinate activities in medieval towns. Historians still debate whether the winter schedule differed from summer, but standing here, you feel the rhythm as a gentle heartbeat linking the town together. Finally, you take a slow step down the winding stairs of the turret, feeling the stone worn smooth by generations of boots. Each footfall is deliberate, echoing softly a private rhythm you carry alone. The town stretches below, a tapestry of snow smoke and life quietly persisting. You pause at the base, taking a deep breath, and appreciate the comforting solitude, the soft choreography of daily motion, and the timelessness of your watchful presence in this snowy medieval landscape. You leave the turret behind, descending to the outer wall's walkway, where snow has drifted into gentle, uneven mounds. Each step crunches quietly beneath your boots, marking your passage in a landscape otherwise untouched. The town below is bathed in soft, diffused light chimneys, wisping smoke in delicate spirals. Medieval towns often relied on careful observation from walls like these, both to watch for approaching travelers and to maintain a subtle order among villagers. Historians still debate whether Gatekeeper's presence was truly about security or largely symbolic, a reassuring sight to those below. Along the wall, you notice small carved notches in the stone. Fringe accounts suggest these were marks left by previous guards, perhaps to count days, track snow accumulation, or leave messages for the next watcher. You run your gloved hand along the grooves, marveling at how tiny traces of human attention can endure centuries. It's comforting to think that in some small way, you are connected to these long-past observers, sharing the rhythm of winter's quiet vigil. A pair of sparrows flits along the battlements, their tiny feet tapping on icy ledges. Medieval gatekeepers often noted animal behavior, interpreting sudden movements or unusual patterns as potential signs of intruders or simply as signals of the seasons. Fringe stories elaborate, claiming these small birds could carry omens or subtle warnings. You smile softly, watching them hop and flutter, imagining them as feathered assistants to your solitary watch. Snow crunches beneath your boots as you round a corner, revealing a section of the wall where lanterns have been hung from iron hooks. Their light catches the crystals of frost that cling to the stone, scattering a warm glow across the white landscape. Some scholars debate whether lantern placement was purely functional, or whether patterns also followed aesthetic or symbolic rules. You enjoy the thought that the guards who hung them centuries ago may have taken pleasure in subtle artistry, even during the harshest winter months. Looking down at the village streets, you notice small gatherings of townsfolk preparing for midday tasks. Merchants shift barrels, children dash along the edges of the market, and cats slink between shadows. Medieval accounts often highlight the role of observation in maintaining communal routines, though historians still argue whether this was organized or informal. Watching the quiet choreography below, you feel a sense of continuity, as though centuries of daily life unfold simultaneously beneath your vigilant gaze. You pause to trace frost along the edge of a stone parapet. Delicate ice crystals form patterns like lace, unique with every passing hour. Fringe anecdotes suggest that guards sometimes read these formations as predictive tools, subtle signs of weather luck, or seasonal changes. Whether fact or fancy, you find the exercise meditative, a simple way to occupy the mind while staying attentive to your surroundings. The crystalline patterns seem almost like tiny windows into nature's artistry, ephemeral yet precise. The bell tower rings in the distance, its slow toll echoing across rooftops and frozen streets. Medieval bells regulated the town's rhythm, summoning workers, marking time, and signaling meals or prayer. Some historians still debate whether winter bells were distinct in purpose from those rung in other seasons. You close your eyes briefly, letting the deep resonance settle, a comforting pulse threading through the quiet expanse of your winter watch. A fox scurries across a distant rooftop, careful and nimble. Some medieval observers considered such animals as minor omens, suggesting upcoming weather or subtle messages from the natural world. Historians argue that such beliefs were mostly superstition, though fringe tales add a charming layer of whimsy to your patrol. You grin, imagining the fox as a tiny, clever co-guardian, its presence adding life and movement to the otherwise serene townscape. Finally, you reach the far end of this section of the wall, pausing to take in the panorama. Rooftops, smoke, snow, and winding streets stretch in a quiet frozen tableau. Each sound, movement, and frozen detail contributes to the soft rhythm of the town's morning, a world both centuries old and immediate in its gentle unfolding. You tuck your hands into your gloves, appreciating the solitude, the meditative cadence of footsteps and snow, and the quiet satisfaction of being a sentinel in this peaceful winter scene. You step carefully along the wall's curve, snow drifting against your boots and cloak. The battlements guide your path like a frozen river, leading you past arrow slits and tiny alcoves where medieval guards once hid during storms or surprise visits. Historians note that winter watch duties were often long and monotonous, yet some evidence suggests that the repetitive pacing helped keep guards alert. Fringe accounts even claim that some patrolling routines included subtle meditative exercises performed to maintain mental clarity while braving the cold. You shake your head, slightly amused at the idea of mental fitness as part of medieval job descriptions. Through a narrow slit, you observe the village well, its stone rim dusted with frost. Villagers draw water cautiously, careful not to drop buckets into frozen depths. Some medieval communities believed the well itself held minor protective spirits, or that frozen surfaces could reveal subtle omens when cracked. Historians still debate how seriously such beliefs were taken, but for you, the sight evokes a gentle curiosity about how humans have long intertwined observation, superstition, and daily routine. A lantern flickers in a distant corner, illuminating a small bakery where smoke curls from the oven. You can almost smell the sweet tang of spiced bread carried by the wind. Medieval bakers sometimes included subtle patterns in the dough, playful shapes meant to charm customers or signal skill. Fringe accounts suggest that some bakers embedded tiny charms in loaves, hoping to bring luck to the household that consumed them. You smile at the continuity across centuries, small joys hidden in daily work waiting to be discovered. You notice a thin layer of frost forming along the battlement ledge. Each crystalline spike seems intricate and fragile, catching sunlight at delicate angles. Some scholars argue that guards may have interpreted such formations as signs of weather to come, while others dismiss the idea as playful folklore. You trace the frost with a gloved fingertip, enjoying the meditative rhythm and marveling at nature's quiet artistry. It's the kind of small beauty that makes long watches bearable even in biting winter. Below, a pair of cats slinks along the market square, their sleek bodies weaving between barrels and frozen puddles. Medieval towns often tolerated and even appreciated such animals, for practical purposes catching rodents and adding life to the streets. Fringe sources suggest cats were sometimes considered mystical guardians of property, though historians mostly attribute their presence to practicality. You grin quietly, imagining the cats as tiny attentive assistants silently judging the villagers' movements. The bell tolls once more, slow and deliberate, echoing across the town and over frozen rooftops. You feel the deep vibration in your chest, a pulse that seems to harmonize with the soft crunch of your boots and the distant shuffle of villagers. Bells were essential markers of communal rhythm in medieval life, though historians still debate whether their winter use differed in purpose from warmer months. Listening now, it's hard not to feel the sound as a gentle metronome of history itself. A fox darts across the edge of the market, its fur bright against the snow. Some medieval observers attributed small omens or messages to such animals, though historians argue this was largely folklore. You watch the fox's cautious movements with a fond smile, letting the subtle dance of human and animal life fill your attention. Its presence adds warmth to the winter tableau, a tiny spark of vitality amid frost and stone. You pause near a crenellation, tracing the frost along its edge and watching the lantern light flicker against the cold stone. Small reflections of sun and ice play across the walls, creating patterns that feel almost magical. Fringe tales suggest that guards sometimes believed these fleeting glimmers could reveal hidden truths or minor fortunes. You laugh softly at the notion, appreciating the blend of practicality, superstition, and aesthetic pleasure that seems to define winter patrols. Finally, as you round a corner, you see the full expanse of the town from this vantage. Snow blankets, rooftops, smoke drifts lazily from chimneys, and life continues in gentle, ordered rhythm. The walls beneath your hands feel solid and reassuring, a bridge between past and present. You take a slow, deep breath, letting the cold air fill your lungs and the serene tableau settle into your mind. Standing here, you feel the quiet magic of a snowy medieval morning, observed, appreciated, and preserved in attentive stillness. You pause at the midpoint of the wall, letting the wind tug gently at your cloak. The town stretches below its rooftops, soft under a thick blanket of snow smoke curling lazily from chimneys like tiny gray ribbons. Medieval towns often relied on keen observation from walls like these to maintain order and safety, though historians still debate how formalized winter patrols truly were. Fringe accounts suggest some guards practiced subtle rituals or even small exercises to keep alert, blending duty with personal routines. You smirk at the thought of centuries-old winter yoga, imagining guards stretching quietly between arrow slits. Your eyes catch the movement of villagers in the market square below. A baker carries a tray of bread snowflakes melting against the warm loaves. A child chases a small dog around a frozen puddle. You note how sensory details from scent to sound were vital to medieval life, helping residents navigate and interpret their environment. Some fringe sources claim that even small animal behaviors were considered messages from the natural world portents to be read carefully. You watch a cat stalk a tiny shadow, and the notion feels oddly comforting, like an invisible layer of protection woven into daily life. A lantern flickers along the battlements, throwing soft circles of light across frost-dusted stones. Some scholars argue that lantern placement was purely functional, while others suggest that subtle aesthetic considerations played a role creating warmth and visual rhythm along otherwise austere walls. You lean closer, tracing the pattern of light across the cold stone, and feel the same quiet satisfaction medieval guards might have felt noticing small details during long hours of watch. Above you, the bell tower tolls once more. Its deep resonance travels across rooftops and streets, a gentle heartbeat connecting the town's scattered residents. Historians still argue whether bell patterns differed in winter months or if their rhythm remained constant year-round. You close your eyes briefly, letting the sound settle over you, syncing your breathing to the slow, deliberate cadence of centuries-old practice. It's a rhythm both practical and meditative, anchoring you to the passage of time. A fox darts across a roof in the distance, its bright fur stark against the pale snow. Some medieval observers imbued such creatures with symbolic meaning, interpreting their movements as minor omens. Fringe tales expand this idea, suggesting foxes acted as guides for night travelers or hidden guardians of town secrets. You smile, imagining the fox as a silent, watchful companion, its small presence adding life and energy to the still white expanse. The snow along the battlements forms soft drifts piling against crenellations and alcoves. You trace the delicate patterns with your gloved hands, noting how each mound differs like a miniature landscape frozen in time. Fringe accounts claim that some guards saw hidden messages or weather signs in these formations, though historians debate the seriousness of such beliefs. Still watching the frozen artistry, you feel a quiet connection to centuries of eyes that observed and interpreted similar winter canvases. Looking down, you notice smoke from a distant hearth curling into the sky. The aroma of burning wood carries faintly mingling with crisp winter air and the occasional scent of baked bread. Medieval townspeople depended on these subtle signals to gauge neighborly activity, assess communal well-being, and even detect minor hazards. You take a slow breath, savoring the mixture of warmth and cold, the tangible evidence of human life persisting amid frost and stone. You shift along the wall, following the gentle curve that leads toward the town gate. Footsteps from your predecessors are faintly etched into the snow, worn smooth in some areas, deeper in others. Historians still argue whether medieval guards recorded or counted these patterns for practical reasons, or if it was more about subconscious rhythm and habit. Either way, the quiet cadence is hypnotic, a gentle, measured accompaniment to your watch. Finally, as the morning sun rises higher, the village below glows softly, smoke curling, snow sparkling, and life moving in unhurried loops. You pause to savor the scene, a tapestry of stone frostfire and quiet activity. Standing here, the chill nipping at your cheeks, you feel a deep satisfaction in your vigilance, a meditative connection to centuries of winter watchers, and a profound appreciation for the serene persistence of everyday life in this snowy medieval town. You continue along the curved walkway of the wall, boots crunching through fresh snow, leaving a trail of footprints that vanish as the wind shifts. Each step feels measured and deliberate, a meditation in motion. The rooftops below glimmer under the pale winter sun, and you notice smoke rising in thin, curling plumes from chimneys. Medieval towns relied on visual and auditory cues from these daily routines, smoke movement and sound, to gauge life and activity within the walls. Historians still debate how much of this observation was truly for security versus communal awareness, but standing here, it feels like both. Your gaze settles on a small cluster of buildings where the rooflines create a series of stepped patterns. Fringe accounts suggest medieval builders sometimes arranged roof shapes to echo protective symbols or secret codes. You smile at the whimsical idea, imagining centuries-old architects embedding playful designs into otherwise functional structures. Even if purely decorative, the effect is magical rooftops, like frozen waves glinting under snow, forming a subtle rhythm that guides your eyes along the village's outline. A crow lands gracefully on the edge of a parapet, shaking snow from its black feathers. Medieval guards often observed birds for practical purposes, detecting intruders or weather changes. Fringe stories embellish this, further describing crows as spiritual companions or messengers that carried silent advice from the natural world. You watch as it hops carefully along the stone wings, twitching with quiet alertness, and it feels like you share a secret understanding, both sentinels, each attuned to the rhythms of the day. You pause to trace frost along the wall's edge. Tiny crystals form geometric patterns, intricate and ephemeral. Some scholars argue that guards interpreted these formations as subtle omens or messages from the environment, while others dismiss it as fanciful superstition. Either way, you appreciate the act, letting the tactile sensation of cold, rough stone mixed with delicate frost serve as a grounding ritual during your long winter patrol. Down below, children dart between the market stalls, their laughter soft but clear against the muffling snow. Medieval accounts highlight the role of youthful energy as part of village life, a counterpoint to the quiet duties of guards. Fringe sources note that the movement of children and animals could also serve as subtle indicators of environmental change or shifts in community patterns. You watch them with a faint smile, realizing that even centuries ago, playful chaos punctuated structured routines. The bell tolls once more, a slow and deliberate note that seems to anchor the rhythm of the morning. Historians still argue whether winter bell schedules differed in intent from those of warmer months, but standing here, it is both a marker of time and a comforting companion. You close your eyes briefly, letting the vibration settle into your chest and sync with the soft crunch of snow beneath your boots. It is a heartbeat, spanning centuries, connecting past and present. A fox darts along the far end of the market, careful and alert. Medieval observers often imbued these animals with symbolic meaning, suggesting omens or small messages from nature. Fringe tales embellish this notion, imagining foxes as playful guardians of the town or secret couriers in miniature. You grin, appreciating the mix of observation and imagination, letting the small, lively creature animate the frozen, quiet landscape around you. Snow drifts over the crenellations, forming delicate rolling hills along the top of the wall. You kneel briefly to study a pattern, tracing the curves with gloved hands. Fringe accounts suggest some guards interpreted such patterns as predictive, perhaps signaling weather or subtle shifts in luck. Historians debate the prevalence of such practices, but you find it soothing to imagine a lineage of observers noticing and reflecting on these tiny details, weaving meaning into the seemingly mundane. As the morning advances, the town glows under gentle sunlight, smoke rising in graceful arcs, rooftops glittering, and the market below hums with quiet activity. You take a slow breath, letting the scents of wood smoke, baked bread, and winter air mingle. The rhythm of your footsteps, the soft tolling of bells, and the delicate patterns of frost and snow form a meditative tapestry. Standing here, you feel the comforting flow of centuries of quiet observation, a serene dance between vigilance, nature, and everyday life. You follow the outer wall as it curves toward the eastern gate, boots crunching in rhythm with the soft snow underfoot. The sun has risen higher, casting pale golden light over rooftops and winding streets. Smoke from chimneys spirals lazily upward, mingling with the frosty air. Medieval towns often relied on careful visual monitoring from walls, especially in winter, when the snow amplified sound and movement. Historians still debate whether guards' winter patrols were primarily functional or served more as comforting symbols of order for villagers below. Either way, your eyes sweep the streets, catching both activity and stillness in equal measure. A small flock of sparrows flits along the battlements, their tiny feet tapping against icy stone. Fringe accounts suggest that guards sometimes interpreted birds' behavior as subtle omens or signals of impending weather. You watch them hop and flutter, considering the centuries of observers who may have looked on with the same curiosity. Their presence adds a touch of whimsy to your solitary patrol, a reminder that even small creatures contribute rhythm and life to the quiet town. Near the gate, a lantern flickers softly, casting warm circles of light across frost-covered stones. Medieval watchmen often relied on lanterns, not only for illumination, but also for signaling between towers or across walls. Some scholars debate whether lantern placement followed purely practical rules, or if aesthetics played a subtle role in arranging their light. You trace the glow with your eyes, enjoying the gentle patterns it creates across stone and snow, imagining previous guards admiring or adjusting them during long frozen hours. Below, villagers move slowly through the morning chill. A baker carries loaves to a small stall, smoke rising in harmony with the tolling bell. Children chase each other through snow-dusted streets, laughter muffled but persistent. Medieval chronicles highlight how these daily movements created an implicit rhythm for guards, a combination of observation, social awareness, and environmental attunement. Fringe sources embellish this, suggesting that playful chaos acted as a natural training ground for watchfulness, keeping minds alert while remaining gentle and non-threatening. You pause to examine frost along a battlement edge, delicate crystals, catching sunlight at intricate angles. Fringe anecdotes suggest guards sometimes read these patterns for weather predictions, signs of luck, or simply as meditative exercises. Historians debate the seriousness and prevalence of such practices, but observing the ice. Now you find a soothing rhythm in tracing its fragile geometry, letting focus and patience anchor your attention. A fox crosses the square below its bright fur stark against the snow. Medieval observers often attributed omens or messages to such animals, while fringe accounts suggest playful guardianship or covert intelligence. You follow the fox's movements, imagining it as a quiet sentinel like yourself, alert to the smallest shifts in the environment. Its nimble presence adds life and unpredictability to an otherwise orderly, snowbound scene. The bell tolls again, deep and resonant. Each note settles over rooftops and streets, harmonizing with crunching footsteps, drifting smoke, and the occasional bird call. Medieval bell schedules were essential for community life, yet historians still debate whether winter tolls carried unique significance. Regardless, listening now, the sound feels both practical and meditative, a gentle heartbeat threading through the town, past and present intertwined. You adjust your cloak, letting it fall neatly over your shoulders, and peer along the wall's length. Snow drifts cover worn stone in soft undulating mounds, and your gloved hand brushes a thin layer of frost from the parapet. Fringe stories suggest that previous guards often left subtle markings, counted footsteps, or traced ice patterns to pass the hours or record time. You smile softly, imagining hands like yours, repeating this quiet ritual across centuries, blending observation care and subtle artistry. Finally, you reach the eastern gate, surveying the town beyond. Streets sparkle under frost smoke, twists upward from chimneys, and the occasional villager crosses an open square. You take a deep breath, letting the rhythm of your footsteps, the tolling bell and drifting snow settle into your awareness. Standing here, vigilant yet peaceful, you feel an intimate connection to both the town and the centuries of guardians who have walked this wall before you, watching, noticing, and quietly participating in the gentle unfolding of winter life. You continue your patrol along the eastern wall boots, crunching softly in the fresh snow, leaving behind a series of crisp footprints. The sunlight glints off icy surfaces, creating a soft sparkle that seems almost magical. Medieval towns relied heavily on visual and auditory cues from elevated positions like this, particularly in winter, when snow amplified subtle movements and muffled distant sounds. Historians still debate how formalized these winter patrols were, but standing here you can't help but feel both alert and quietly enchanted by the serene tableau unfolding below. A small flock of sparrows hops along the battlement, their delicate feet pattering softly against stone. Fringe tales suggest that medieval guards sometimes interpreted bird behavior as minor omens or indicators of environmental changes. You watch them dart between stones, imagining them as tiny companions to your solitary watch, silent co-observers of the town's quiet life. Their presence brings a touch of whimsy, a reminder that life continues even amid the frozen stillness. You pause to admire the frost along the battlement's edge, intricate crystals forming lace-like patterns in the sunlight. Some scholars argue that medieval guards may have interpreted these delicate formations as subtle signs of weather luck or other mystical messages, while others dismiss the practice as folklore. Either way, tracing the fragile ice with your gloved finger feels soothing, a small ritual that connects you to centuries of watchful hands before yours. Below, villagers move slowly through snow-dusted streets. A baker carries freshly baked loaves to a stall, smoke curling from ovens and blending with the cold air. Children chase each other in gentle arcs, laughter muffled but persistent, while cats weave between barrels and footprints. Medieval observers often incorporated these small, everyday movements into their understanding of community rhythm. Fringe accounts embellish this, suggesting that animals and children together formed an informal network of observation, alerting guards to subtle shifts in the environment. The distant bell tolls again, its resonant sound echoing across rooftops and frozen streets. Medieval bells regulated communal life, marking time meals or prayer. Historians still debate whether winter bells differed in function from those of other seasons, but here the sound threads seamlessly into the rhythm of your patrol. You close your eyes briefly, letting the deep tone resonate, harmonizing with the soft crunch of snow beneath your boots and the gentle rustle of birds. A fox crosses the market square, below, sleek and cautious. Some medieval observers attributed symbolic meaning to such animals, while fringe tales suggest they acted as small guardians or messengers. You follow its graceful movement, appreciating the interplay of life and observation, the way tiny, subtle presences animate the quiet townscape. The fox vanishes into a shadowed alley, leaving behind only the sense of motion, alertness, and rhythm. The frost along the parapet catches the light, forming sparkling miniature hills and valleys. Fringe stories claim guards sometimes saw weather signs or hidden messages in these crystalline patterns. Historians debate whether such practices were widely observed or mostly imaginative, but the delicate beauty is undeniable. You trace the frost, letting its intricate forms slow your thoughts and deepen your awareness of the peaceful surroundings. You shift along the wall, rounding a small turret and peering down the winding street that leads toward the central square. Smoke, snow, and the occasional passerby create a living tapestry, each element contributing to the town's quiet pulse. Observing this rhythm, you feel an odd sense of temporal continuity. Centuries of footsteps, glances, and gentle routines echo here, overlaid upon your own present steps. Finally, as your gaze sweeps across the rooftops and winding streets, you pause to inhale deeply, savoring the soft scents of wood smoke, winter air, and distant baking. The sun casts gentle shadows across the frozen scene, and the town seems suspended in a delicate, shimmering balance. Standing here, Vigilant yet calm, you feel intimately connected to both the enduring architecture and the invisible lineage of watchful guardians who have kept these walls before you. The quiet magic of winter life settles over your mind like a soft blanket, each observation a whisper of centuries past, guiding you through the gentle rhythm of your patrol. You follow the curve of the eastern wall boots, sinking slightly into soft snow that muffles your every step. The town below glistens under the morning sun, rooftops, glittering smoke drifting in delicate curling plumes. Medieval towns relied on visual cues and keen observation from walls like these, particularly in winter when both sound and movement were altered by frost and snow. Historians still debate whether guards' duties were primarily for security or more symbolic, but standing here you feel both alert and serenely part of a living history. A small flock of sparrows hops along the battlements, flitting from stone to stone. Fringe accounts suggest medieval guards sometimes interpreted their behavior as subtle messages or minor omens of weather changes. You watch them pause and preen, imagining them as tiny, feathered companions, quietly observing the rhythms of the town alongside you. Their movements add a gentle liveliness to the otherwise frozen and silent landscape, like punctuation in an otherwise unbroken narrative. Your eyes catch frost forming delicate geometric patterns along the parapet. Some scholars argue guards may have interpreted these intricate designs as signals of approaching weather, while others dismiss the idea as folklore. Either way, tracing the ice with a gloved finger becomes a meditative ritual, connecting you to centuries of watchful hands that have wandered these same stone paths. The crystals glint in sunlight, tiny frozen windows into nature's artistry. Below the market square hums with quiet activity. A baker carries trays of bread smoke rising from ovens, while children chase each other along snow-lined streets. Cats slink between barrels and footprints, alert and nimble. Medieval chroniclers noted such daily rhythms as vital components of communal life, while fringe sources embellish this with imaginative readings, animals and children together forming a subtle network of observation. You smile at the interplay of movement sound, and life noting the tiny patterns that stitch together the town's winter tapestry. The bell tolls again, slow and deliberate. Each resonant note drifts across rooftops and frozen streets, threading time and space together in a gentle cadence. Historians still debate whether winter bells differed from those in warmer months, but now it seems less important than the comforting rhythm itself. You let the vibration settle into your chest, syncing with your own footsteps and the distant shuffle of villagers below. A fox crosses a narrow alley, its orange fur bright against snow. Medieval observers often attributed omens to such animals, while fringe tales describe them as playful guardians or secret messengers. You follow its cautious movement, enjoying the whimsical notion that the small, lively creature mirrors your own quiet vigilance. Its presence adds energy and unpredictability to the measured calm of the town, a reminder of nature's subtle agency. You pause to observe the frost and ice on the parapet. Some fringe accounts claim medieval guards saw hidden messages or signs of fortune in such formations. Historians debate the prevalence and seriousness of these interpretations, but you find comfort in tracing their jagged patterns, letting the meditative act slow your thoughts and sharpen your attention simultaneously. The frost glimmers like scattered diamonds, ephemeral yet precise. The wind picks up slightly, brushing your cloak and carrying the faint aroma of burning wood and fresh bread. You take a slow, deep breath, letting the chill sharpen your senses while softening your thoughts. Each sound, the distant bell crunching snow-rustling feathers, forms part of a larger symphony of winter life. The town feels both ancient and immediate, a landscape of observation rhythm and quiet artistry, unfolding gently beneath your vigilant watch. Finally, as you near the corner where the wall bends toward the southern gate, you pause to survey the panorama. Snow blankets the streets, smoke rises in delicate spirals, and the townsfolk carry on their quiet routines. You feel the comforting pulse of centuries, the gentle rhythm of watchful steps across generations, and the serene beauty of a snowy medieval morning. Standing here, you are both guardian and observer, woven into the subtle, enduring choreography of village life, present yet timeless, alert, yet softly enchanted by the delicate harmony surrounding you. You round the bend toward the southern gate, boots crunching in the powdery snow, leaving a trail that quickly vanishes under new flurries. The town stretches below rooftops, frosted smoke curling lazily into the pale winter sky. Medieval guards often relied on elevated vantage points to monitor daily life, especially during colder months, when the air carried sounds further and snow highlighted movement. Historians still debate whether winter patrols were truly for defense or more symbolic, a reassuring presence for villagers. Either way, the rhythm of observation feels timeless and comforting. A small group of sparrows hops along the wall, pecking at frozen crumbs left from earlier visitors. Fringe accounts suggest that guards occasionally interpreted these birds' behavior as minor omens, messages from nature, or signs of upcoming weather. You smile as you watch them, imagining centuries of watchmen who might have found similar amusement or meaning in these tiny feathered companions. Their soft movements and occasional flutter bring warmth and life to your otherwise solitary patrol. Frost clings to the parapet in delicate crystalline patterns. Some scholars argue that medieval guards read such formations for weather predictions, while others dismiss it as fanciful folklore. You gently trace the icy patterns with a gloved hand, feeling a meditative calm as the intricate designs shimmer in the weak winter sunlight. It is a small grounding ritual connecting you to countless predecessors who may have done the same during long, cold watches. Below, the market square hums quietly with life. A baker delivers bread to a waiting customer, smoke curling in gentle spirals, while children dart through snow-lined streets, laughing softly. Cats slip between barrels and footprints, alert and sleek. Medieval chroniclers highlighted such movements as markers of communal rhythm, while fringe accounts suggest that animals and children collectively formed a subtle, almost imperceptible network of observation. Watching this gentle choreography, you feel a soft kinship with past guardians, noticing patterns and rhythms that transcend centuries. The bell tolls once again, a deep, resonant note spreading across rooftops and alleys. Medieval communities relied on bell signals to coordinate activities, mark time, or summon residents. Historians still debate whether winter bells differed in purpose from those rung in other seasons, but for now, it serves as a comforting pulse anchoring your watch. You close your eyes briefly, letting the sound resonate in your chest, syncing with your soft footsteps and the distant shuffle of villagers. A fox darts across the snow-covered rooftops, agile and alert. Some medieval observers imbued such creatures with symbolic meaning, while fringe stories describe them as silent guardians or secret couriers. You follow its movement with quiet delight, imagining a shared vigilance, your eyes scanning the village, the fox darting through shadowed corners, both alert and discreetly playful. Its presence enlivens the calm, frost-dusted scene. The frost along the wall catches sunlight, forming miniature hills and valleys. Fringe anecdotes suggest guards sometimes interpreted these crystalline patterns as subtle signs or messages, though historians debate the reality and prevalence of this practice. Either way, tracing the frost is soothing, a meditative act, linking you to centuries of watchful hands. You lean against the parapet for a moment, enjoying the delicate shimmer, letting attention and patience intertwine. Looking down the streets, smoke rises from chimneys in curling ribbons, children play, and animals move with quiet purpose. The town's rhythm is subtle but persistent, a layered dance of human, animal, and environmental cues that shape daily life. Observing it, you feel the comforting continuity of generations, a tapestry of motion, sound, and sensory detail that has endured across time. Finally reaching the southern gate, you pause to inhale deeply. The smell of wood smoke, faint bread, and winter air mingles while the soft crunch of snow and distant bell tolls create a gentle soundtrack. Standing here, vigilant yet relaxed, you sense the quiet magic of a snowy medieval morning. You are both observer and participant, woven into a centuries-old rhythm of watchfulness, gentle routine, and serene life. You continue along the southern wall boots, leaving crisp impressions in the snow that quickly vanish beneath soft flurries. The town below sparkles under the weak winter sun, rooftops frosted smoke rising in delicate twisting ribbons. Medieval guards relied on walls like these for observing daily life, particularly in the quiet, snowy months when sound carried differently and movements were amplified. Historians still debate whether winter patrols were more symbolic or genuinely functional. But as you move, the rhythm of vigilance feels meditative, a gentle link to centuries of watchers before you. A small group of sparrows hops along the battlement, their tiny feet pattering on frost-dusted stone. Fringe accounts suggest medieval guards occasionally interpreted bird behavior as omens or subtle messages about weather or luck. You watch them flutter and preen, imagining them as tiny companions in your solitary watch, quietly observing the rhythms of life below. Their soft movements bring a whimsical liveliness to the otherwise frozen scene, a reminder of small wonders, even amid routine duty. Frost lines the parapet in delicate crystalline designs, catching sunlight at angles that make them sparkle like tiny gems. Some scholars argue guards may have interpreted these formations as weather indicators or subtle omens, while others dismiss it as folklore. Either way, tracing the ice with your gloved fingers offers a soothing, meditative ritual. You pause, letting the fragile beauty anchor your attention while connecting to centuries of watchmen who may have performed the same quiet gesture. Below, the market square hums gently with winter activity. A baker delivers fresh bread smoke, curling in soft spirals, while children chase each other through snow-covered streets. Cats slink between footprints and barrels, nimble and alert. Medieval chronicles emphasize these movements as vital markers of communal rhythm, while fringe tales imagine the animals and children as part of an informal observation network, silently conveying information to attentive eyes. You smile at the gentle choreography, noticing the subtle patterns and rhythms that have persisted across generations. The bell tolls again, a resonant sound threading across rooftops, streets, and frozen squares. Medieval communities relied on bell signals to mark time, summon residents, and coordinate activity. Historians still debate whether winter bells carried different meaning from those rung during warmer months, but the sound now serves as a gentle pulse syncing with your soft footsteps and the subtle shuffle of villagers below. A fox darts across a distant alley, fur bright against the snow. Medieval observers often attributed symbolic meaning to such creatures, while fringe tales portray them as playful guardians or secret messengers. You follow its nimble movement with quiet amusement, imagining a shared vigilance, your watchful gaze above the fox weaving alertly below. Its small, lively presence enlivens the frosted scene, adding warmth and motion to the measured calm. Snow drifts along the crenellations, form soft rolling hills, and you pause to study the patterns, tracing their gentle curves with gloved hands. Fringe accounts claim some guards interpreted these formations as signs of weather fortune or subtle guidance, though historians debate the practice's prevalence. Still, the delicate beauty offers meditative calm, a quiet tactile engagement with the frozen landscape. Looking across the rooftops and winding streets, smoke curling, children playing, and cats darting, you feel a deep sense of temporal continuity. Centuries of footsteps, glances, and daily routines echo beneath your gaze, layered over your own careful steps. Observing this rhythm, you feel both guardian and participant, present yet linked to generations of watchful eyes before you. Finally, as the morning stretches and light glints off snow and stone, you pause near the southern gate. The crisp air carries faint scents of bread smoke and winter pine. The soft crunch of snow beneath your boots, the distant tolling bell, and the subtle movements of the town form a gentle symphony. Standing here, vigilant yet relaxed, you sense the serene magic of a snowy medieval morning, your mind settling into the quiet rhythm of centuries-old life beneath your watchful eyes. You reach the final stretch of the southern wall boots, pressing gently into snow that muffles your steps. The town below glimmers under the weak winter sunlight, rooftops frosted smoke curling lazily from chimneys. Medieval guards relied on walls like these for both observation and reassurance, particularly in the quiet months when the snow amplified every footstep and shadow. Historians still debate whether winter patrols were primarily functional or symbolic, but you feel a satisfying rhythm in your measured steps, a cadence that ties you to centuries of watchful predecessors. A few sparrows hop along the battlements, their tiny claws leaving faint impressions on frost-dusted stone. Fringe accounts suggest guards sometimes interpreted their behavior as omens or subtle guidance, a quiet connection to nature's small signals. You watch them preen and flutter, amused by the thought that these birds, small as they are, could be companions across centuries, silently sharing the rhythm of observation with you. Frost clings to the parapet in delicate crystalline designs. Some scholars argue that medieval guards may have read these patterns for practical or symbolic purposes, while others dismiss the practice as fanciful superstition. You trace the fragile ice with gloved fingers, letting the meditative act ground your attention. Each crystal reflects sunlight, like tiny jewels, ephemeral yet precise, a tactile reminder of the enduring beauty that surrounds you, even in the coldest months. Below, the market square moves slowly with life. A baker carries bread to a stall, smoke curling in soft spirals. Children dash through snow-laden streets laughing quietly. Cats weave among barrels and footprints, alert yet graceful. Medieval chroniclers emphasize these movements as markers of communal rhythm, while fringe stories suggest that animals and children formed an informal network of observation. You smile at the quiet choreography, recognizing the subtle patterns connecting past and present life in the village. The bell tolls again, a deep, resonant note that seems to echo off every rooftop and alleyway. Bells regulated time meals and prayer in medieval communities, yet historians still debate whether winter tolls serve different purposes. Regardless, the sound now forms a comforting pulse, harmonizing with your soft footsteps and the gentle shuffle of villagers below. A fox darts across the distant square, agile and alert. Medieval observers sometimes ascribed omens or mystical significance to such creatures, while fringe tales portray them as playful guardians. You follow its movement, enjoying the thought of shared vigilance, your eyes scanning the town, the fox moving through shadows both alert yet quietly unobtrusive. Its presence enlivens the frozen measured scene. Snow drifts along the crenellations form soft rolling hills. Some fringe stories claim guards interpreted these formations as signs of fortune or weather, though historians debate the prevalence of such rituals. Still, tracing the frost with your hands offers meditative calm, a quiet connection to the past. You pause for a moment, savoring the tactile beauty of ice and stone. As you step toward the wall's end, you take in the rooftop streets, smoked children and animals, feeling a profound continuity of life and rhythm. The town, frozen yet alive, feels both ancient and immediate, a living tapestry that stretches across centuries. Your patrol has woven you into this subtle choreography, a guardian and observer sharing in the quiet magic of snowy medieval life. The wind picks up slightly, carrying faint scents of wood smoke, fresh bread, and the crisp air of early winter. The soft crunch of snow beneath your boots, the distant bell tolls, and the subtle movements of villagers form a gentle layered symphony. Standing here at the wall's end, you feel fully immersed in the serene rhythm of the town, the quiet pulse of centuries, and the subtle magic of a snowy medieval morning that lingers long after your steps fade. The patrol complete, you lower your gaze and let your hands rest lightly on the cold stone of the parapet. The snow has settled into soft drifts, covering rooftops and streets with a gentle uniform hush. Smoke rises lazily from chimneys, curling into the pale sky and blending with the soft winter light. The distant bell tolls once more, slow and deep, each note echoing across the town like a gentle heartbeat. Your boots have left a temporary trail along the wall, a quiet reminder of your presence. Yet the world below continues undisturbed, serene, and patient. The children's laughter has faded into soft echoes, mingling with the subtle rustle of birds and the occasional shuffle of cats weaving between barrels and footprints. The baker's oven smoke lingers faintly, carrying warmth into the crisp winter air. You take a slow, deliberate breath, letting the scents of wood bread and frost fill your senses. Everything feels suspended, delicate, and balanced, as though time itself has slowed for just a moment to accommodate the quiet rhythms of life within the town walls. Frost sparkles along the battlement miniature crystalline hills, catching the weak sun like scattered diamonds. You trace the patterns gently with your gloved hand, feeling the fragile artistry beneath your fingertips. These small ephemeral formations have witnessed countless winters, observed by generations of watchful hands just like yours. Fringe stories suggest that guards sometimes found omens or subtle messages in such ice. But regardless of interpretation, the act of noticing and pausing brings a meditative calm that settles the mind and softens the day. The fox you watched earlier slips into a shadowed alley, unseen, but somehow still present in memory. Its nimble, alert movements seem to echo in the quiet rhythm of the town, a tiny pulse of life against the frozen backdrop. The birds have settled along the battlement, chirping softly before drifting into silent stillness. Even the bell's tolls feel less like signals now, and more like a gentle guiding cadence that syncs with your own heartbeat and breathing. You lean against the parapet, letting the cold seep through your gloves in the most comforting way, sharp enough to awaken the senses, but soft enough to anchor them. Each breath of crisp air carries reassurance. Centuries of watchfulness, small routines, and quiet observation have woven this rhythm long before you arrived, and it will continue long after you step down. You feel the weight of time blend seamlessly with the lightness of the present, a gentle meditation on continuity and care. Slowly, your gaze sweeps across the rooftops, snow smoke, and narrow winding streets. Villagers move in gentle loops, their movements soft and unhurried, each step part of an enduring choreography. The town exists as a layered tapestry of human life, animal companions, and the natural world interwoven with centuries of observation, memory, and subtle magic. The cold air, the glittering frost, the curling smoke, and the muted sounds all converge into a quiet symphony, a final note to accompany the gentle pacing of your watch. As your mind drifts, allow each sensation, the crunch of snow, the scent of bread and smoke, the shimmer of frost, the soft call of birds, the distant bell, to fade into a slow, harmonious rhythm. The town below carries on untroubled, steady, and enduring. You, the gatekeeper, are now part of its long, quiet story, your presence gentle and unintrusive, your awareness aligned with the calm pulse of snowy medieval life. And now let your own breath slow, letting the winter morning's serene magic settle over your thoughts. The patrol, the fox, the children, the birds, the frost, the bell all dissolve softly into memory, leaving only a quiet, comforting awareness of presence, rhythm, and time. Feel the warmth of centuries fold gently around you, the sense of guardianship easing into a gentle lull. Drift with it calm, secure and softly enchanted by the world you have watched over.